Here's how you'll know it's happening to you before it's too late. Right now, somewhere in this world, a woman is sitting across from a man who is slowly rewriting her reality without her even noticing. She thinks she's in love. She thinks she's found someone who finally gets her. But underneath the sweet words, underneath the late night calls, and the way he looks at her like she's the only person in the room, something darker is being planted. Psychologists have spent decades studying manipulation, control, and emotional abuse, and what they found is unsettling. The most dangerous men don't announce themselves with red flags waving in the wind. They speak in soft, believable sentences. They say things that sound almost romantic, almost caring, almost normal. And that's exactly what makes them so hard to spot. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through five specific phrases that, according to relationship psychologists, therapists, and survivors themselves, are early warning signs of a man who will slowly consume your identity, your confidence, and your sense of self. Some of these will surprise you. One of them, in particular, is so common that you've probably heard it said as a compliment. By the end of this video, you will never hear these words the same way again. Stay with me, because the third one is the one almost nobody talks about. Let's start with something that feels so small in the moment that most women brush right past it. He says, "You're too sensitive," or some version of it, like you're overreacting, or you're making a big deal out of nothing. On the surface, this sounds like a mild criticism, the kind of thing anyone might say in an argument. But psychologically, this phrase is doing something much more calculated. It's called gaslighting, and it's one of the oldest tricks in the manipulation playbook. What it does is shift the conversation away from his behavior and onto your reaction to his behavior. Instead of addressing what he did, he makes you question whether you even had the right to feel upset about it in the first place. And here's the part that makes it so effective. He doesn't have to say it often. He only has to say it enough times at the right moments for your brain to start doing the work for him. You'll begin to second guess your own instincts before he even opens his mouth. You'll start apologizing for feelings you haven't even fully processed yet. Therapists who specialize in emotional abuse say this is often the very first crack in the foundation, the moment a woman starts trusting his version of reality more than her own. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because gaslighting rarely works alone. It's usually paired with something that feels like the opposite of control. It feels like devotion. The second thing to listen for is a sentence that sounds, at first, like the most romantic thing you've ever heard. He says, "I've never had to try this hard with anyone before." Or, "No one has ever made me feel like you do." Or, "I've never opened up like this to a single person in my life." It feels flattering. It feels like you've unlocked something rare in him, like you're special, like you're the exception to every rule he's ever lived by. But psychologists who study manipulation patterns point out something crucial here. Statements like this are often less about you and more about setting an invisible debt. He's telling you, without saying it directly, that you now owe him something for being the one who finally reached him. This is the emotional equivalent of a hook baited with a compliment. Once you accept the idea that you are uniquely responsible for his happiness, for his healing, for keeping him feeling this way, you've unknowingly signed up for a job with no end date and no room for boundaries. Every time you pull back even slightly, every time you need space, every time you're tired or busy or simply human, it can be twisted into evidence that you're failing him, that you're letting him down after he tried so hard. And that guilt, that quiet, creeping guilt, is one of the most powerful tools a manipulative person has, because you gave it to him yourself, wrapped in a moment that felt like love. If you've made it this far, I want you to keep watching, because the next one is the phrase that almost every woman has heard at least once, and almost none of them realized what it actually meant until it was far too late. The third thing, and this is the one people rarely talk about, is when he says, "My ex was crazy," or all my exes were toxic, or women just don't understand me. At first listen, this sounds like harmless venting. Everyone has had a bad relationship, right? Everyone has a story about someone who hurt them. But psychologists who study patterns of abuse say that a consistent, repeated narrative where every single past partner is painted as unstable, dramatic, or crazy is one of the strongest predictors of future emotional abuse. Why? Because it reveals something about how he processes conflict and accountability. If every relationship he's ever had ended because the other person was the problem, statistically, logically, something isn't adding up. People are complicated, relationships are complicated, and almost no breakup is 100% one person's fault. When a man cannot identify a single thing he could have done differently across multiple relationships, it's not because he's simply unlucky in love. It's because he has built a story where he is always the victim and never the cause. And here's the unsettling part. One day, you will become the crazy ex in his story too. You will become the version he tells the next woman, the one used as proof of how badly he's been treated. The moment you start hearing that story about his past, you are, whether you realize it or not, hearing a preview of your own future with him. Let that sink in for a second because the next one is even sneakier. And it usually shows up wrapped in something that looks a lot like closeness. The fourth phrase to watch for is something like, "You're the only one who really understands me," or "I don't need anyone else, I just need you," or "Everyone else in my life has let me down, but you're different." This one is subtle because it plays directly into a woman's natural desire to feel needed, to feel like she matters deeply to someone. But psychologists who study coercive control describe this exact pattern as one of the earliest stages of isolation. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, affectionate sounding sentences that slowly position you as his entire emotional support system while quietly discouraging him from needing anyone else. And eventually, discouraging you from needing anyone else either. Over time, this can shift into comments about your friends, subtle jabs about your family, little sighs when you make plans without him, or gentle guilt trips when you spend time on anything that isn't him. It rarely starts as an order. It starts as a feeling. The feeling that spending time away from him is somehow a betrayal of what you have together. And by the time a woman notices that her circle has quietly shrunk down to just him, it can feel almost impossible to rebuild what was slowly, deliberately dismantled. Isolation is one of the most dangerous tools in emotional control, not because it's loud, but because it's disguised as intimacy. Now, before we get to the fifth and final phrase, the one that ties every single one of these together, I want you to really think about whether you've heard any of these already in your own life or in the life of someone you love. Because once you hear the last one, you're going to understand exactly why these five things are never random. They're a pattern, and patterns don't lie. The fifth thing, and honestly the one that should raise the loudest alarm, is when he says something like, "I don't like it when you hang out with your friends without me," or "Why do you need to go out? Isn't spending time with me enough?" Or "I just worry about you when you're not with me." On paper, this can look like concern. It can even look like love, especially to a woman who has never been shown healthy boundaries in a relationship before. But psychologists are extremely clear on this one. Controlling behavior almost always disguises itself as protection. He's not saying, "I don't trust the world." He's saying, "I don't trust you without me." And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Healthy love expands your life. It makes room for your friendships, your ambitions, your independence, because a secure partner is not threatened by your world existing outside of him. But control shrinks your life. It slowly convinces you that your safety, your happiness, and your worth are only valid when they're filtered through him. This is the final piece of the pattern, the one that locks everything else into place. The gaslighting made you doubt yourself. The manufactured specialness made you feel indebted. The stories about his exes previewed your future. The isolating language made you dependent. And this last phrase, the quiet possessiveness disguised as worry, is what keeps you there. Because by this point, leaving doesn't just feel hard, it feels unsafe, even when nothing physically dangerous has happened yet. Here's what I want you to really understand before this video ends. None of these five things on their own prove that a man is dangerous. People say things impulsively. People have insecure moments. Context matters, and no single sentence should define an entire relationship. But psychologists who study abusive relationship patterns agree on one thing again and again. It's never about one comment, it's about the pattern. It's about whether these things happen once, in a moment of stress, and are followed by real accountability and change, or whether they happen again and again, slowly, quietly, reshaping how you see yourself, how you see him, and how you see what you're allowed to expect from love. Emotional manipulation doesn't announce itself with a warning label. It doesn't look like the villain from a movie. It looks like someone who says all the right things at first, someone who feels like home, someone who makes you feel chosen. That's what makes it so dangerous. And that's exactly why so many women don't see it until they're already deep inside it, wondering how they lost themselves along the way. If you recognize even one of these five things in a relationship you're in right now, or one you've been in before, I want you to know this isn't about blaming yourself for not seeing it sooner. Manipulation is designed to be invisible from the inside. The fact that you're here, watching this, thinking about it, paying attention to the pattern instead of just the individual moments, that already means something in you is waking up. Trust that instinct. The quiet unease you feel when something doesn't add up, the moment you catch yourself shrinking to keep the peace, the times you found yourself apologizing for things that were never your fault to begin with, those are not small things. Those are your mind trying to protect you, and it deserves to be listened to. So here's my question for you, and I really want you to answer honestly in the comments below. Which one of these five phrases hit closest to home for you? And did you recognize it in the moment, or only looking back